an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering The Haunting of Hill House. Season 1, Episode 3, Touch. In this episode, we get to know Theo a little bit better and find out about her weird touch powers, which, that explains the glove thing, but also, oh my god, this is the worst. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Candace for commissioning this episode. Earlier today, guys, Candace and I were texting because we were talking about other stuff because Candace is in charge of the spreadsheets and whatnot for Spoil Me. And she was like, if you want to stop covering Hill House, if you don't like it, we can stop. And I was like, what? No. And she said, well, you just seemed really scared. And I was like, I am. I am horrified all the time. But I'm having a good time, right? Like, that's the point of horror, I guess. It's just I don't cope with it as well as other people do. I just don't cope with it, guys. I don't know how people are out here watching this shit without something shielding their face from having to see everything. I don't want to see it all. I just want to see as much as I need to know what's happening. And other than that, I don't, no. No. I don't know how y'all do it, just watching it. Owen can just sit and watch. Wow. How? Literally, what is wrong with you? Something is. I'm just saying. It's my theory. Meg says in the chat, Theo's ability is probably psychometry, ability to learn facts / history about an object through touch. Yeah, and it's a really common, like, in fiction, this is brought up a lot. There's a whole Stephen King, I think maybe series, now that I think about it. The book I covered for the Unspoiled Book Club back in the day. I can't even remember the name of it now. But it was like, that was the whole plot, was that this guy could do that sort of thing. And Ashley is sharing a link with pictures of ghost appearances in this. There's a couple where they're the same photo, just sharpened to see a little bit better. Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. I'm going to click that in a little bit. And let's see. Candace says, I've seen this 6 or 7 times by now. Typically, though, I do not care for horror. Yeah, I'm really, got kind of back and forth on horror. There are times where I decide that I don't like it. And then there'll be something like this where I'm pretty, like, enraptured. Again, guys, so last episode I mentioned that I thought maybe I'd gotten a little further into the show than I thought. And I was trying to remember, there was something that looked like it was, like, in a basement. This episode is the one. And this episode is the one that I finally tapped out. This was too scary. I couldn't do it. Owen wanted to be watching this at night, like as our evening show before going to bed. Like, I'm sorry, not all of us are absolute fucking lunatics. I'm not watching this shit before I turn all the lights out in my fucking house to lay in a bed where there could be a thing at the foot of the bed, like there is in the show, many times. So no, I couldn't do it. But for this time, for this show, it's perfect. It's perfect because I can share my absolute terror with all of you, and my pain is entertainment. You know what? I'm willing to make that trade. That's fine. Because I want to watch it. I want to suffer? Like a little? Am I in a BDSM relationship with y'all? Oh my god. I think I am. Because I do, like a little. But, not too far. I need a safe word for this show. Oh, God. All right, so I'm really excited too, because obviously the whole thing with Theo is we get to know her more here, but the brief flashes that we saw of her in the other previous episodes, she really feels like she doesn't have as much of an emotional connection with everybody else. And I was worried that I wasn't going to like her. And instead, I love her so much. And I am like just delighted that I have been given information enough to get past the coldness of how she comes across initially. And it was a nice little like method of storytelling as well, because we get to see what she presents to the world and understand probably the reaction that some people may have to her, especially her family. But then when we find out what she does for a living and we see how much... So full disclosure, I kind of relate to her. Obviously, I am not a psychometrist. But what I mean is, Theo is really sensitive, and so she comes across as emotionally distant and cut off because she is so sensitive that she needs to distance herself or else she can't handle anything. And oh, damn, is that me. This is really something that I am like working on as a person. But it is really hard for me to open up and be vulnerable with people because there is a fucking tide pressing against the wall that I have built. And if I open the little door, I don't think I get to close that again. Like, that's just staying open. The force of the water coming through, I don't feel like I have control over that anymore. And that's just open now. Like, that's how I'm going to live. And I'm not ready to do that. So I don't, and then I seem like I don't have the emotional connection, when the fact is I'm just really scared of it because I don't like not having control. I don't like it. And it's just really difficult because I am extremely sensitive. So I will have cut myself off enough that in my interactions with people, I can come across as like sort of harsh and mean because I have made an effort to distance myself. But I will be fully honest with you guys. If some of the meanness and harshness that I directed other people were reflected back at me by those people, I would be crushed. Like, my own attitude is, I can't take my own medicine, is what I'm saying. And that is because I am sensitive. I just am. And I have thought for a long time that I am not, that I'm tough, but I'm not tough. I have just figured out a way to cope. That's what I've done. So her talking about building this whole bridge or this whole wall of like strong bricks, I didn't realize that I was doing that, but I absolutely have been doing that for like at least a decade and probably much longer than that. Let's be honest. But I did not know that's what I was doing. And it's a real fucking mind fuck when you get older and realize that's what you've done. And now it's your job, if you want to fully connect with people, to take it down. And how? You've literally made it so strong just so that nothing can take it down. And now you're supposed to do it. Oh, I don't like this work. This is too much. So I just really 100% understanding where Theo's apparent like coldness comes from. And this, the fact that she is a counselor is so great. What a surprise. What a complete shock to find out that this is the work she's doing when she seems as if she has no connection to anybody's emotions around her, you know? But again, it's a coping mechanism that she's created for herself, and it makes total sense. So the whole thing with her working with these children is that she's talking with kids that have like behavioral problems. And it's unclear to me exactly who she works for. If she works for the state, I don't think so. I think that she's like private practice, or maybe not private practice. Maybe she's part of like a group. But it seems like the parents who bring the kid in are doing this of their own volition and have sought her out themselves because they are concerned about their kid. So I don't know if she's like full on psychiatrist or if she is, you know, because she says, I'm getting my fucking PhD when she gets the money from her brother. So I'm going to assume that she is a psychiatrist. And yeah, I just love the fact that after what she went through as a kid and after the like ways in which she experienced such trauma, it motivated her to reach out to other kids and try and help them talk through the shit they're going through when they may not have the vocabulary or agency to do anything for themselves. It's just kind of beautiful, you know, like really. And the one thing that I felt a little bit bad about is that she's talking to this little girl about Mr. Smiley. And she says something about how I used to be afraid of a lot of things, but I like realized that they were in my mind and I didn't need to be afraid of them. And I was like, okay, look, I understand saying that to a kid to a degree, but also Theo, you literally have a superpower. So don't like just say that it was in your head, and it's not necessarily just in these kids' heads either. And I don't feel like that's the language you necessarily want to be using to encourage somebody to like talk to you, because how are they going to trust you if you're already asserting that maybe it's just in their head? Like that was the only thing where I kind of felt like, I don't know if this is the way to go, you know? But nevertheless, so, okay. So we're going to talk about the opening scene is the one that doesn't actually wind up like having any sort of climax exactly, which is what the show is really good at, is they build this horrific tension and then they kind of don't give you any outlet for it at all. It's like edging, but with fear. And they have her cuddled up by a ghost, basically. And she thinks that it's Nell, afraid because she had a nightmare or something. And she complains a couple times that Nell's squeezing too tight, that she needs to let up. And she turns over and there's nobody there, which I just think that would cause my death. I just do. Like, there's just no recovering from that. There's just no... And she says later when she's talking to her dad, it must have just been a weird dream. And I swear to God, if only I could, like, get myself to believe that sort of thing. And maybe I could, when you're trying to cope, especially as a kid, maybe I could, but I just don't see myself being able to, like, tell myself that story after it seemed so real to me. On the other hand, as an adult, we, like, talk ourselves out of a lot of shit. So, you know, God knows. So that's the opening. And then we have, Candace really, like, encouraged me to not skip the opening credits. And she said that the animation was extremely significant and important. And I don't know what to tell you, Candace. I watched it. I watch it every time. I don't think I've ever actually skipped the intro for this show, but I obviously don't have enough information to know what exactly is, like, totally significant here. I am assuming to a point that these statues each represent a character in the show, and we have one that's like presenting with their hand first, and I'm assuming that's about Theo. Then we have like a pair who I have to think are the twins, and we see that these are like statues that are in the house as the camera like backs up. But yeah, I just wanted to let Candace know that I did like, oh, okay. Candace says the house part, the hallways, they move around. You said before you thought the house was alive and that it makes things happen. The hallways move around. Ooh, okay, I didn't notice that. All right, I'll have to pay attention. Do you mean like they move around from one intro to another? Or do you mean that like within the one intro you see them shifting around? Let's see. She says, at the end of the opening sequence, like little walls, hallways shift like the Game of Thrones intro. Oh, okay. You know what? Let me go back a little bit and just take another look at that. 'Cause like I said, everything sort of backs up, and then you see the the doorknob, the like dragon, or not dragon. It's a lion doorknob, and a light coming through it, which I assume is the door to the red room, I think. Oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, doors moving and shifting. Okay, cool. So the house is doing shit. The house is fucking with people. Mm-hmm. Okay, house, I see you. So this is when we go into the first scene with Theo counseling this little girl. And of course, as you are watching this, you think it's a creepy ghost, right? Like, this is a ghost show. You figure she's seeing some creepy ghost and her parents don't really believe her. And I stopped because I did this one as a live watch also. And I'm so glad I did, because this was the scariest one so far. And I stopped it because her parents say to Theo, we're not really worried about Mr. Smiley. We're worried about her behavioral problems. But then go on to say that her behavioral problems started right around when she started talking about Mr. Smiley. And I'm just like, well, do you fucking think that means anything, you dumb schmucks? Like, sincerely, what kind of logic is that? I mean, I understand that correlation is not causation, but Jesus Christ. Come on. So, thankfully, Theo is not as much of a dodo as they are. And she is paying attention to the Mr. Smiley thing, especially. And she has this thing with touching people and being able to sort of sense what's going on with them. And she finds it really surprising that when she touches this little girl's hand, she does not get anything off of her at all, like she normally would. And this kind of it leads to, it's sort of an interesting thing, because later on, Theo has a sort of dream premonition thing. It's hard to say. I assume it's a dream, even though we see the covers actually getting pulled down off of her. I'm assuming that's part of the dream. But I have to be honest with you guys. The pulling the covers off of a person, foul play, red card, send them off. You just don't fuck with people in their beds, man. Once you start, the fact that Theo has been targeted in her bed a couple times now. Everybody else, in their bed, they kind of get to, be in a zone that it feels like the ghosts aren't willing to cross a line on. But Theo, something crawled into her bed with her and, hugged and clung to her. And then we have this dream thing. And it just feels like, for whatever reason, she doesn't have that kind of protection. Now, granted, we do see a ghost hanging above poor Nell's face when she's a little girl, but she's on a couch. She's not in her bed. And when she sees the broken neck lady, the bent neck lady, it doesn't seem like the bent neck lady comes at her in bed. It seems like she's standing by the bed, and that's what's freaking Nell out. But it doesn't seem like it's willing to reach out and touch her. Now, I could be wrong about this. I mean, this is just what I know so far. But I am just super duper uninterested in anything that can mess with, taking... My blankets are my shield. You know? Just leave me my little shield. But yeah, so whatever it is the little girl has gone through gets into Theo's head. And it was sort of interesting to me. I wanted to be either Theo is getting something because it's what the little girl said sort of embedded in her mind and she can't stop thinking about it. Or she had the kind of waking dream she had because whatever the little girl had did get through a little into Theo's subconscious via that touch. but didn't manifest until Theo was like half asleep kind of thing. Because the reason I'm thinking this, the dream that Theo has about Mr. Smiley, his face looks weird like the wood. It feels like it's a specific image that she's already got in her mind, leading her to understanding a little bit more. And it just feels like either that's a bit of like additional psychic ability that we didn't know she had, or something from touching the little girl's hand actually did get through a tad and just sort of like rolled around in there until she was half asleep, you know? It could be either thing, but yeah, I just really, this whole scene with her and waking up and seeing it, you guys, oh, I was super duper not ready for this. I didn't know what was going on. And the way that she reacts to it, and she just knows that it's this little girl. I'm going to screen share again with y'all, so that you guys can see this. Oh my God, that's right. Because this is when she gets up and goes to the fucking... goes to the morgue where her sister's body is. Kill me. Why, after this fucking dream, would you do that? You know why she would. But I hated it so much. Alright, so I'm having to watch this with you guys. Yep. See, he looks like wood. Right? Oof. Hated it. Hated it. Hated it. But I think that might be she got something that she didn't know she got. She thought there was a complete brick wall. Not quite, actually. That's what I'm going to go with. So she winds up going over to their house and sort of investigating and touching things in their basement because that's where the little girl says Mr. Smiley lives. And she touches a variety of things, trying to get a sense off of any of them. And it's not until she touches the couch that she realizes. And she lays back on the couch and you see her like screaming no, because she's sort of just filled with the sense of what happened here, which must be utterly horrifying to have to feel this sort of thing. You know, the whole thing with Theo seeming so distant is really like, that's a kind of stereotype about a lot of social workers because they see such horrific shit over and over again. And there's a point at which you have to shut yourself off or else you can't function and you can't do your job or just like live as a person after seeing the way that people live and treat one another. So it's no surprise really, especially considering it's not just that Theo is seeing shit. She is actually living it for a moment. And there has to be like an internal trauma that happens every time she goes through this, I would think. So she goes upstairs and she shakes this guy's hand, gets him to shake her hand because she's obviously trying to tell, is this what I think it is? And she stares at him as she's shaking his hand and he says, what is it? And what are you looking at? And she says, your smile. And I think the way she says it, he knows that she knows. But he can't say anything in the moment because maybe she doesn't. Maybe he doesn't want to put all his cards on the table, actually. But she winds up calling somebody from social services who comes in, and the cops also come. And she says on the phone, if you talk to him, I am certain that he will confess everything. Which is really interesting because I am assuming she got that when she touched his hand. And I'm always just surprised by people who do shit like this and then are like, it feels like they're just sort of waiting for somebody to call them on it because they know they are fucked up and harming people. But until they actually get held accountable externally, they can't stop themselves. And it's a weird position to be in that I just like, God, it gives me such creeps, you know? But yeah, evidently he did confess. And she points out when she's talking about this later with the girl Trish that she takes home again. She recognizes that, like, while getting him out of this girl's life is a plus, the little girl's getting put back into the foster system now, and it's a real gamble if she's going to wind up with anybody better, because there are predators in the foster system. Like, that cannot be avoided. All different kinds of predators, you know. And she is fully aware that this isn't exactly a solution. She's doing, like, this one thing here, and this little girl is still going to be thrown into an ocean and have to fucking paddle and hope for the best. And that must be incredibly discouraging. You know, this is the sort of thing that, what do you do when you realize that you can't save everyone? You can't even save, like, a significant percentage. You just have to work on a case by case and hope that means something. And it's just, there's a moment in the Dresden Files where Harry goes to get advice from somebody who works on finding lost kids. And there is like 7 photos of kids on the walls. And they ask, how many kids have you looked for? And he says something like, you know, a couple hundred. And he says, how many have you found? And he says, a fair amount. And then, how many have you found alive? And he gestures to the wall of 7 photos. And they're like, that's it? And he says, that's enough. Like, that's just what keeps him going, is that another one, maybe I can find another one. And it's just, to me, there's that voice going, you're not doing enough. But you have to be willing to accept your limitations as a human being and be like, I'm doing something. I'm doing what I can do. And that's it. And it's just, I'm not good at it. Just saying. It's not for me. Not for me. Thank you. So that pretty much wraps up that storyline. There's another little kid that seems to be sort of dealing with some antisocial stuff as well. And we don't really get, what's the word I want? We don't get closure on that story. We see him and we see her making notes on him and all of that, but it's not really like the focus of the episode. So I'm sort of wondering if he's going to come back or if it's just meant to be an example of the number of children that she deals with all the time. So I'm going to back up here and let's talk about her as a kid. So we see one of the first times that she experiences her touch sense. Maybe not the first time, but it seems like a particular time where anybody else has noticed the significance of it. Perhaps she's experienced it a number of times and it's just never impacted anybody else, or she didn't particularly pay attention to it. But her dad gives her a bunch of stuff because he's clearing out areas of the house. And he hands her this box along with a bunch of other things to put in the trash. And she's holding it and she says to him, this is fancy. And it's like a closed box. There's no way to actually know what's in it. It's nailed shut, literally. And he pries it open and finds a 1940 Clos du Bois, I think is how you say it, bottle of wine. No idea anything about this, full disclosure. But evidently it's worth a lot of money, I would imagine. And she just somehow knew, even though she really shouldn't have. And this comes up, like a certain sensitivity comes up again. Later, she's walking through the house and she comes across her mother and Mrs. Dudley, who are in what looks to be sort of like a sunroom. And there are a bunch of statues in here. I just genuinely would like to know who the fuck made this house littered with statues. Like, are they naturally occurring statues spawning from the various souls the house consumes? Because that just feels right to me. But yeah, her mother is saying, don't you feel the cold here? And she says, oh, I feel cold all over the place. This whole house is cold. And I was just, thinking to myself how unfortunate for this poor girl to be as sensitive as she is in this fucking house. Now, granted, Nell seems to be even more sensitive. And her mother says something to her later about the fact that Nell called the house loud when they first moved in, and how interesting a descriptor she found that to be. And yeah, I mean, this house, this is the kind of house that I don't feel like you even need to be sensitive and you know something's up. You could be as cut off as anybody and you're still going to get fucking spooked by this place if you have a brain in your head. So yeah, we go, oh, I forgot about this. There's a scene where she and Shirley are talking to one another, and she's making herself some lunch, and it turns out that, like, she takes a break from work and comes over to Shirley's to make herself some lunch. Well, she's staying with Shirley, so it's, like, technically like she's coming home for lunch. But it's clear that a part of her wants to talk over what's going on. And yeah, she says something about a little girl who's put up a bunch of walls, and Shirley's just like, oh yeah, I don't know anything about that. So then we get the transition into the story of the dumbwaiter. Everybody, say it with me. Don't get into a dumbwaiter. That's all. I feel like if the Sixth Sense has taught us anything, it's don't do it. It's bad. It's bad for you. It's bad for your health. It's bad for everybody else's health. Just don't do it. So she, as a little girl, her younger brother and sister discover this like little horn that is in the kitchen in this like, you know, spot next to the dumbwaiter. And they wonder what it's for. And she figures out that it's meant to be like a little sort of telephone system within the house, which is wild. I've seen like, you know, the bell pulls, but I've never seen an actual like speaking horn like this. And I wonder how well it actually works, because we see it being used in this episode, but I have no idea if that's an accurate representation of how that would work, you know. And she and Luke go to find the other end of it. And when they walk into this bedroom, Luke says, oh, what is that smell? And she says, it smells the same in here as the rest of the house. Like, she doesn't notice it. So I think that's pretty interesting that whatever it is, it doesn't seem particularly extreme for her in this room. But Luke detects something in here that she doesn't until she touches the bed. When she touches the bed, she can tell that this was a sick room and that this bed probably had somebody die in it. Likely, you know, she doesn't say that, and I have a suspicion it's because she knows that'll kind of scare her little brother who's literally lying in the bed at the moment that she discovers this. So yeah, you don't want to like be like, hey, there was a dead body here, buddy. Although for little boys, sometimes they would enjoy that. But you know, like I said, Luke is pretty sensitive, as we know. So it's just interesting to me that obviously Luke is also sensitive in his way. It's just really different how it manifests for each of them. And I'm sort of wondering, okay, so we've got Steve, Shirley, Theo, Luke, and Nell. So we've got 5 senses. Theo is touch. I'm going to go ahead and say maybe Luke is smell, even though it's not like that's the, you know, but maybe if that's his thing. And what if we gave Nell sight? Because she certainly sees shit. I don't know, but she says the house is loud, so maybe it's hearing for her. Maybe that's it. But, you know, I just be sort of interested in like an analysis of that. Are they each meant to be a little bit stronger in a particular sense than the others are? How does that look? And if now let's give her hearing, if she says that it's what do you call it? If she says it's loud, we have Steve, who has never seen a ghost before. So what's left? Taste. Steve, taste? How would taste work? I don't know about that. And then Shirley. I mean, she doesn't seem to have, I don't know what kinds of like experiences in that regard she has had. We have her, you know, like with the kittens and everything. But that really felt grounded enough in reality that I don't want to like make a judgment call on any of that in regard. And by grounded in reality, I mean like what happened with the kittens was freaky, but there was nothing ghostly necessarily about it. You know, we have had the pounding on the walls that she experienced, but that's about the only thing I can think of. So I have to reserve judgment. We'll see. Maybe my theory doesn't hold any water. But yeah, so this leads to, at one point she goes downstairs to, oh my God. Okay. So first, guys, this whole thing, do you guys see this reflection in the screen on the TV? Because we have Theo. Is that the actual video, or is that a reflection of the room that she is in? Because Theo's doing like a music video, like dance thing. It's honestly super fun to watch because this is exactly what my jam would have been as a kid if I had had the space and whatnot. And it's obviously a room that is intended for dance because there's like a bar on one wall and big mirrors, the whole 9 yards. And she turns it off, and this lion's head doorknob begins to shake. And again, with the like edging, because this shakes and she's looking at the doorknob and she's calling out to see if there's anybody there. And she looks under the door, getting way too close to it. I really thought something was just going to reach under the door. And this is not the door though, because there was a part of me that thought this behavior, the thunking, was only going to be coming from behind that one red door. But evidently this is happening all over the house. So yeah, don't love that. Oh man, I just really hate all of the long shots in this show because every time I just assume that there's about to be a fucking ghost in the background. But yeah, she assumes that this is Luke fucking with her and just basically tells him to leave her alone and goes back to doing her dancey thing, which is probably the best way to handle this, is put on loud pop music and just distract yourself from what the fuck. And as we cut to the present, that's definitely what she's still doing. That's part of her going out to the club and whatnot, is, you know, her trying to avoid thinking about what she's been thinking about. It's one of her coping mechanisms. And, oh, right. Okay, Candace is saying, I always felt like Steve was a brick, and Shirley was only sensitive in her sleep, and Theo and the twins had it the worst. Yeah, that's interesting. I forgot about Shirley and her sleep, because she says something about the red room in the very first episode. Then she wakes up in the moment where Nell has clearly like hung herself, and she says something about how Nell is in the red room, and that just keeps recurring, is that it's like when she's asleep, when it can actually sort of get in. And yeah, Steve, it's just interesting that Nell finally broke through on that for him. So we jump ahead to this fucking moment, you guys. It turns out that it is Luke in the dumbwaiter. At first, we just see Theo going down to like get a drink of milk or something, and we see somebody in the dumbwaiter, and I was like, what the fuck? And then it turns out to actually be her brother. And I can't emphasize enough how much I vaguely remembered this from the first time watching it, and I was just like, oh no, this is the thing, this is the thing, this is the thing. So he really wants to take a ride in the dumbwaiter, and she does it, even though against her better judgment. The whole thing is that she is supposed to send him up to his bedroom, basically. And instead, when she closes the thing, it begins to go down. And they cannot stop it. None of the button pressing does anything. And I just, guys, there's just so much about this whole thing that as children, what do you even. So he winds up in what we find out later is a secret basement kept for rum running, basically. They were selling booze back in Prohibition days, and there's like barrels and stuff down there, and it's unclear. There may still be booze down here, like it may be that kind of situation. And poor Luke is down here. There's rats all over, and it's spooky, and he's understandably starting to be like, dude, no, bring me up. Please bring me upstairs. And then, you guys, we see this hand come out from behind one of the barrels. I swear to God, I almost just peed my pants. He can tell some shit's not right. This is one of those moments where his flashlight starts blinking, which is just one of the most unfair fucking things. And something is crawling towards him it's a corpse, it looks like, crawling towards him on the ground. And poor Luke is flipping out. And thankfully, their parents arrive. And for some reason, of course, when they arrive, they're able to get this to reverse. It's like the house can only do this shit when there's not enough people aware of it. Or until it's gained enough power somehow. It has to, ramp up. And Luke gets taken out, and there are slices in his pajamas, and he isn't actually apparently hurt. It doesn't look like it. I won't hold my breath on that, because it may be that it did something to him that you can't see. I don't know what this does. I have, God knows. And he talks to her later and tells her that it's very clear that the parents don't believe him. They don't even believe that there was a basement at all. And poor Theo is riddled with guilt over this. But she goes and investigates finally, because she believes him 100%. And she touches his hand, and so she can tell too that there's a reality to this. And she goes and searches it out and finds the basement and is able to prove it to their parents. And she explores this whole place with the kind of boldness that I will confess I do not have now, and I don't think I will ever have. God bless her, but oh my God, Theo, a sense of self-preservation would be good for you. Just don't go around in the strange basement where your brother clearly got attacked by something, opening doors at random and touching shit when you know that you get the sense off of stuff when you touch it. Oh my God, I could not handle this. I just was so freaked out the entire time. So yeah, she finds the basement, wanders around. We have the whole, exploration. Then we go to her investigating this family, and it's a similar thing. She's down in the basement again, doing another investigation. And this guy's, here we go. I'm about to watch this scene that I didn't actually completely absorb during the live watch, because I got so scared that I covered my eyes just in time and missed it. So, here we go. She's talking to her mom. And it's honestly a sweet scene for a minute, where her mother is commending her for finding out where the basement was. I'm a little annoyed you went down there by yourself, but nevertheless. And her mom touches her hands, and she feels this weird sensation and looks down. Sees that her mother's hand, first she's wearing some rings that I'm not sure if she was wearing before or not. And there's blood. And as soon as I saw that, I clapped my hands over my eyes. So, okay, guys, I'm going to watch it with you guys. And she looks up. Oh my God. Her mother's head is caved in on one side. Not even caved in, it's just a bloody mass. I can't tell if it's that her mother is, because I had assumed that when her mother died, she hung herself. But this is really looking a lot more like she got thrown out a window, or something hit her. Like, this is a severe head trauma. And the fact that she can see this is really interesting because Theo's senses are showing what has happened to something. It doesn't tend, as far as we have seen, to show the future. So whatever she's seeing with her mom here is a bit of an exception to the way that her abilities have seemed to function so far. Apparently, we haven't obviously gotten to see everything that she could do, I'm sure, but it is just a little bit different. And I'm wondering about the fact that her mother had been having these migraines already. And her mother says later on when she's talking to Theo about her sensitivity, the migraines started when I was a little girl. So she is equating her migraines to her overall sensitivity, which we sort of knew that was likely what was happening in that scene due to her description of like the blackness and us feeling like something is trying to get a hold of her and us knowing that something happens to her later. But obviously in the scene when she's telling her husband about it, it just sounds like she's describing, a neurological event. It doesn't sound as if it's something that's like, if you are on the outside of it, you would interpret that way. So I find it interesting, one, that she interprets it this way and apparently has for some time. And when Theo asks, does Dad know that you're sensitive? She says, kind of, which, this is the sort of thing where you get into a funny area because, like, were I to be, for example, experiencing something like this woman, I couldn't talk to Owen about it because Owen does not believe in this sort of thing at all. He doesn't believe in ghosts. He doesn't believe in the supernatural. He doesn't believe in, like, really even things like aliens, which I think it's not even about supernatural at that point. It's just logic. But anything like that, he just doesn't really have any tolerance or interest. And so it's a weird spot to realize, like, oh, okay, if I were to go through something like this, I feel like I can tell you anything, but there are some things that I would have to hold back from you. And it doesn't seem as if her mom and dad have a bad relationship. They fight here and there, but this is a stressful situation and they actually do pretty well overall, it seems. So the fact that he kind of knows leads me to think that she doesn't feel super comfortable talking to him about it because she doesn't really think that he's going to buy it, which is just a shit situation to be in. And I sympathize, it's not like I have anything like this that I hold back on. But, I do for example, in October when I do Unspooked for patrons, I will get pretty into those scary stories. And Owen doesn't believe in them at all. He thinks they're all completely invented. And it's just sort of a disconnect. Like, how can you talk to somebody about how wild the story is if they just believe that it's completely fiction? There's no common ground really, except to be like, well, it is a good story though, So anyway, this changes my interpretation of things because I was assuming this whole time that how Nell killed herself, which I'm assuming is a hanging, and I have to keep with that assumption. I don't remember if we hear that for sure, but we do see Shirley work on her corpse, and she doesn't have this sort of injury. It's like she's got some bleeding around her eyes and mouth, which I have to assume is something that would happen from strangulation. But I was assuming that however Nell chose to end her life was in mimicry of how their mother allegedly ended her life. And I guess not. It looks like they're totally different things. So, and this also, talking about the opening sequence, a lot of these statues are fractured and look like they're breaking or broken. And that feels like it must be lining up with this lady for sure. And her poor broken head. And she backs off, poor Theo, screaming at what she saw from her mom. And her mother is like completely flipped out and later on gives her a pair of gloves to cope with her sensitivity because she can see something happened. She doesn't have the words for it, but it's clearly, she's aware there's something in particular going on with her daughter, which I really appreciated that because at least there's somebody out here who's attempting to look out for these kids, but they can't know what terrible, the place they've brought them to, and how all these little measures that you're trying to take to shield them, they're not going to be enough, dude. They're, and let's see, we have that conversation with them and the gloves. Like I said, I really do appreciate her mother, and the woman playing her mom is really good at exuding this sort of, she has the maternal instinct and concern, but it doesn't feel like she's overbearing. She's doing her best. It really feels in this scene, as well as a few others, that she is doing her best, and so is the dad, and that makes what happens with them so much worse, because they are a family that it feels like could have been okay under other circumstances. They could have actually all been cared for in a way that very few children have the privilege of. And then this thing happens and it just rips it apart. And that's part of what occurs later on when Nell is talking to Shirley, because Nell gets word from Shirley. Shirley shows up to tell her, or I'm saying Nell, Theo. Theo gets told by Shirley that Nell is dead. And she is really angry. And she says that Nell, more than anybody, should know what this can do to a family. And I really appreciated that, because that's always been my feeling in response to the idea of someone ending their own life, or simply dying because they have neglected themselves, which was the case of my father. My father was on a couple of different medications, and he just refused to take them. Just didn't, his attitude, especially once he became a born again, was pretty much, if it's my time to die, it's my time to die. And he wouldn't wear a seatbelt, he just, for no good reason, just because. And really what it was he had a death wish. My dad didn't want to be alive anymore, but he had to be. So he just did what he could to sort of shorten it on purpose. I really believe that. And he did indeed. He died. He was 64. Not very old. And it was a heart attack, and he hadn't been taking his medication. And I personally am still so angry at him for that. And so Theo's reaction to hearing that her sister has died and killed herself, we know something else was going on. Something else was happening. But to Theo's mind, she seems to have a similar view of Nell as her brother does. Stephen, not Luke. And there's a sense of her thinking that Nell is a drama queen. And so her rage, there's an extra feeling of resentment added to it, because of this whole relationship and the baggage they've already had. So I'm going to back up before I talk about what winds up happening in the very end of this. We have the whole thing with Steve selling his book, and he has a family meeting. Noted Luke is not there. I'm assuming that he's still in rehab or on the street, whatever it is that's going on with Luke. And he is offering each of them 8% of the royalties on the book. And Shirley basically tells him, we don't want any of your money. It's blood money. Shirley's husband agrees, but it seems really clear in the moment that he does not agree. And later on, he talks openly with Theo about the secret checking account. And it's clear to me that he did decide to take the money on the DL, and he just didn't tell his wife, which I am dying to know what he's been doing with it. I have to assume he's been using it to keep their business afloat, because his wife keeps on giving their services away. And oh, she is going to be so fucking angry. She is going to lose her mind. Like, this is the kind of shit that could lead to a divorce, frankly, you know? And I just don't know what he's going to be able to say to explain this that will convince her of anything. Good luck, buddy. So Theo, she does decide to take the money. And we see her getting a check for $15,000 from Steve, which, like, that's 8%. God damn. And she tells him she's going to get her fucking PhD. That's what she's doing with the money. It's a really tense scene because she brings up a couple of the things that he got wrong in the book. One of them being saying that Luke found the secret basement, which he did not. She did. And he looks a little bit surprised and sort of apologizes, but I think it's fascinating to know he did not interview them to ask them what happened to write his book. He was evidently writing this book, like, out of his own memory, which, bold, okay? And then she brings up, and I say out of his own memory, asterisk, because then Theo says, it's really interesting how you wrote about that night because you were asleep for 99% of it. And he completely sidesteps this and asks her what she's going to do with the money, obviously trying to remind her not to be antagonistic to her gift horse. And I just really want to know what he did right. What? Like, I didn't realize, I was sort of figuring that all of this came from him talking to them over the couple of years preceding when he finally wrote the book. And to find out, evidently he wasn't doing that. Then yeah, where did he get all of that information? So then we have the scene where she goes to see her sister in the morgue and she touches her. And I was flipping out. I was just really thinking there was going to... Something was going to happen. Oh, God, you guys. So she touches her. And it is a pretty intense moment. Because you see her completely lose it. Her eyes, like, are closed initially. But then she opens them. She seems to be just looking. And then they open wider, and she backs away and crashes into the table behind her, curls up on the floor, and screams. So, like, what the fuck? What was that? What the fuck was that? And then we get her little moment of memory, or no, I don't think it's after that, actually. Maybe it's before. We see what happened the night that they all left the house. Is that at the very end of this scene? I'm trying to find it so that we can watch it. But she is grabbed by her father, and evidently she can... Yeah, it's at the very, very end. She sees a series of images when her dad grabs her because he touches her skin. And I'm going to watch these with you guys. Okay, what the fuck was that? You guys. Okay. So we've got a creepy, smiling, what looks to be almost like a face of, is it her mother? Is that her mom? Or is that something else? What the fuck? It's something dead. Or it's a statue. But I don't know. Maybe it's something dead. It looks like, I don't know. Covered in dust or something. We see him interrupting the kids and, like, throwing their cups aside. And then something, what was that? There was a little girl, I think, grabbing a pair of bars. I'm trying to see. I'm trying to pause it. Oh, shit, it went too fast. Okay, then we see a body that I think might be the one that was in the he found it. Because we see a hand off to the side with, like, a hammer. So that looks like they uncovered something that they did not want to uncover. And then we see a shot of him shoving his wife away. I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, she starts screaming at him to not touch her. And we cut to her with Trish, and she tells Trish to touch her. And that's the end of the episode. And it's really interesting to me that she can deal with touching people sexually, because I would really think that that would bring up a lot of stuff that would be even harder to cope with sometimes, depending on the person. But that like, guys, I don't know where to go with it. Poor Theo, man, this is rough. And how does he get her to leave the house now? Like, and what is it that we saw? I'm assuming that him knocking over the cups and everything at the table where Nell is sitting is him grabbing up the kids and bringing them outside. But it might have happened like way earlier than that. We don't have any idea on the timing of anything that she's seeing. So I don't know. And I didn't really talk about Trish much this episode, but Trish deserves better. She gets sort of softened up by Theo telling her about the trauma that she's gone through today. But honestly, for me, this is a reason to walk away. I'm too old for this kind of shit anymore, you know? So yeah, that is the end of the episode. And Theo is kind of my favorite now. So we'll see if that continues, because I assume that as we go forward, we're going to get an episode that's looking at Nell, at Luke. I'm guessing Luke has to be next, because Nell's dead, and so she'll be saved for last. But if we get one through her perspective at all. And I'm really worried about seeing Luke's, because he was very close to Nell. And so I have to imagine that they collectively had the worst time of it. So maybe another live watch will be in order. Keep your eyes open for that. All right, guys. Thank you again so much for listening and for hanging out with me. Thank you to Candace. Appreciate you, girl. And, I just wanted to mention, Ariel in the chat says, one person analyzed them to be Theo touch, Luke smell, Nell hearing, Shirley taste, more because she's the communicator and talks in her sleep. Interesting. Okay. Steve sight, because he only believes what he sees, and finally finally sees Nell in episode 1. Okay. Well, we'll come back to that. All right, everybody. Well, I will see you on Friday with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.